Welcome to Schmidt List, a podcast on innovation, creativity, and entrepreneurship. Join host Kurt Schmidt, president of Foundry, as he and his guest share valuable insights and strategies. This is the perfect opportunity to explore fresh ideas to improve yourself and your business. Come join Kurt as he interviews this week's inspiring guest.
Rick, how are you today?
I'm very good, Kurt. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for joining. So, Rick, you are an institution in the Minneapolis-St. Paul area when it comes to entrepreneurship. Tell me a little bit about the work you do these days, and who do you serve?
Sure. So I work with early stage companies, and I'm kind of half entrepreneur, business builder, and half investor. So usually those two constituents are on the end of their spectrum, and I kind of bridge that gap. So I'm building things alongside the entrepreneur, yet I speak the language and also write checks like an investor. And so I'm kind of partnering with both sides to bridge the gap. And how I got here, long journey, which you don't need to hear all about, other than way back when I was telling folks what stocks to buy and sell. So analyzing companies was where I started. I then went into investment banking, where I learned how to raise money, package deals, kind of get a sense for what would sell and not sell. And then lastly, tied it all together doing private equity and venture capital. And so it's been a long journey to where I'm at today, but I always been working with companies trying to grow, companies trying to go from A to B, and then problem solving and helping them along their life journey.
I love it, Rick. And I'm sure you've found a lot of value in that journey. Speaking of value, I do want to talk about 2023 is an interesting year in terms of VC equity and funding, because a recent report came out saying that the amount of VC funding that has been available this year is the lowest it's been since 2017. Do you have any thoughts on why it might be difficult for people to be finding funds this year? What's different?
Well, with all due respect, many investors follow the herd. And right now, the herd is skittish, given the economy, given inflation, given geopolitical things. And so it's just like, what you and I feel with our pocketbook when we're paying more at the gas pump and we're paying more with our electricity bill. And we're seeing some of the people that we interact with in the business community slow pay. I mean, you're getting a sense we're probably a little tighter with our wallets and our checkbooks and our credit cards, and the venture capitalists are no different. They're human, and things are just a little nerve-wracking right now. But then also things have been so good for so long. Ultimately, what happens is when things are good, valuations go up. And when valuations go up, it puts a pressure on returns. Returns come down, and then the venture community and other investors kind of take a half step back, kind of regroup, and that's what you're seeing right now.
It makes sense. Well, so tell me about Club E. Club E is something you started, what has it been, like 16, 17 years ago now?
This is our 17th season. We just started. So I started it in 2007, and we run kind of like an academic year from the fall to the spring. When I started it, my kids were little, so full disclosure, I didn't want to be doing it during the summer when they were off from school. So I conveniently took the summer off. Plus, it gave me a breather, too. I did it originally almost in partnership with the Minneapolis Club. And back then, they were trying to do clubs within a club. And Minneapolis Club is like a city club that you'll find throughout the country. And the cool thing there is a lot of smart people, a lot of people doing creative and interesting things. And here in Minnesota, you could hear stuff like from the CEO of 3M or the head of the local Federal Reserve. There was a lot of macro things and a lot of stuff that I found interesting and would go to these luncheons and these lectures and these happy hours and all this stuff. But there wasn't something built for the entrepreneur. It wasn't something built for the person who was trying to grow their own company or grow a company. And so my original concept was you go to lunch, you'd learn something, you'd go back to your office and you'd implement it that day. So it was all about helping folks become more productive as business leaders. Obviously, I wanted to include, networking and stuff like that, but it really was educating people. And again, full disclosure, come from a long line of teachers. So standing up in front of the room and waving my arms around and talking and trying to educate or help people on their journey comes naturally. And I like that. So that's what came into there. And then the Minneapolis Club was a special place. And it really was behind how the city of Minneapolis and the Twin Cities area got built. And so there's just kind of some magic to being there. And so I've helped companies get started. I've helped companies raise money. I've put founding teams together. And then I've even helped people meet one another that have led to a marriage. So you never know what you're going to get when you come to Club E.
I love it. So we talked when we kind of pregame this, we talked about there's two kind of areas of entrepreneurship. There's mindset and skill set. And when you were talking about what makes a good entrepreneur, what are some things, if I'm thinking about it, right? Because a lot of people, they're entrepreneur curious, right? They're like, well, I could, but I have kids and I have a mortgage, so I can't start a business, or I'm too old, or I'm too young, or there's a lot of things that we tell ourselves to get in the way. What are some things we should be actually taking stock of ourselves, Rick, when it comes to should we think about this entrepreneurship path as an option?
Sure, Kurt. So I agree with you 100%, and you're right on there. And most of the trouble comes from folks having limiting belief systems and people holding themselves back. In fact, they end up being their own worst enemy. Typically, some of the things that come up really, in some ways, could also be viewed as an opportunity. So like right now, with skittishness around the economy and things being a little tough, yeah, in theory, that might be a hard time to start a business. On the other hand, people are looking for new ways to do things. People are looking for new ways to save money. And so actually, it's been proven over time that starting businesses when the economy is bad is a good way to go. And then another thing that people do is they look at the risk. Oh, startups are risky and they fail. And that's true. But people that go to work at a large corporation and think that they're bulletproof and that's not risky, they're missing the boat too. So actually, you have more control doing your own thing because you can control your destiny and you can change course how you see fit. So I actually believe there's less risk in doing your own thing and working at a small company because you can prove yourself and you can become more important and more valuable to an organization and less risk. And then ultimately, I think that if you were to take stock in yourself and you say, okay, I'm willing to do this, but do I have what it takes, as opposed to is in the environment around me conducive to doing things right now. But you're looking at yourself. First thing, which you and I talked about, Kurt, was having grit and perseverance. And so if you're one to be able to put your nose down and stay focused and grind and hunt and fight and scratch and claw and not worry so much about what's going on around you, who's saying no, who's trying to throw cold water on your idea, whatever. If you're willing to try to persevere through that stuff, that would be a good indication that you'd be a wonderful entrepreneur. And then another, which we talked about, Kurt, was have you been able to, in the past, have passion and energy around hobbies or sports? Did you play sports competitively? Did you play a musical instrument at a high level? Did you do theater? Did you do art? Did you strive to improve? So it's really kind of an improvement mindset, a growth mindset. Did you strive to do something better than you did yesterday? Yoga, you're making little micro improvements every time you go to a yoga class. So are you of the ilk that want to make little micro improvements as you try to better yourself and better your life? And if you're gritty and you're willing to persevere and you're kind of person who has the growth mindset, you can definitely start a business or join a founding team. You have what it takes.
I love that. I love that. The idea of just having resiliency is key, right? And again, you need resiliency in any career that you're in, but there is something. There is a lot more ups and downs when it comes to business ownership. The highs are much higher. The lows can be much lower.
Yeah. If I could just add one other thing, as you said that the highs and lows, you have to be internally driven. If you need external validation, you're not always going to get it doing a startup or going to an early stage company. So you have to be motivated yourself. Are you the kind of person that gets yourself out of bed in the morning, following your own compass and doing what you think is right and building your life, as opposed to needing a pat on the back or other kind of validation from other folks? So do you have kind of a internal balance sheet, or do you have an external balance sheet? And if you have an internal balance sheet, doing your own thing, while not easy, is easy to do.
Yeah, I love that. There's an old Plato philosophy around the cave, and there's the idea of, I think Kierkegaard said, there's people that choose to believe lies, and then there's people that refuse to believe the truth. And so I think there's a little bit when it comes to entrepreneurship where, especially if you're starting a company that's going to replace taxi cabs across the United States, or you're going to deliver groceries to people's houses by having random people just get in their cars and go shopping for you. These ideas, before they're real, are crazy. They're unrealistic. And you do have to have that internal motivator. But how do you balance that, Rick, between what your vision of the future could be and what reality is? Because there are a lot of people out there with crazy ideas. Sure. And how do you find out if those ideas are crazy enough that they just might work, or they're just crazy?
Sure. So, Kurt, one of my favorite sayings is being wrong and being early look exactly the same. And so one thing would be, how do you validate some of your assumptions? What are the little micro things you can do to validate an assumption? And so being out and talking to a customer, showing customer maybe a mock-up of a product, showing a customer a PowerPoint presentation of what this thing might look like in the future. So I would say put things into bite-sized pieces, get customer feedback, and then fail fast. Try something and, hey, you learned something, and now you're going to turn a little bit to the left. Okay, turn a little bit to the left, go do that. And so you also, in this day and age, have digital marketing where you can spend $10 or $100 and you can figure out whether that works. And then guess what? Add another zero and now spend $100 or $1,000. And then you can find out if that works. And then add another zero and you can spend $1,000 or $10,000. And so you're doing little things that don't cost that much money, but allow you to learn, and then get away from the build it, they will come, try to build the Taj Mahal, and then open your doors and wonder why nobody comes. Do little micro things along the way. Learn, pivot, learn, pivot, learn, pivot, learn, pivot. And that also, frankly, go back to where you started today. Venture capital is tight. You don't have to go raise $10 million to do that. You can spend $1,000 of your own money over the next 6 months doing little micro campaigns and digital marketing and play with some things. Most of the time, the companies that I get involved in are folks that have developed some of their product, but they haven't solved it all. So they're off the ground, they're flying, maybe a little wobbly, and maybe we don't have a lot of altitude, but we're up a little bit. And then it's a matter of trying new things, kind of like standing in your kitchen and, hey, does this need a little bit more salt, or does it need a little more garlic or whatever? Yeah. So basically, you're doing little micro experiments, and that, I believe, in the era we're in and the technology we have, is the way to go.
Yeah, I love that idea, Rick, is because the idea is that you do have this strong vision for the future as an entrepreneur, but you're not so you don't have the blinders on so much that you can't take external input into how to make that idea better, right? It's not just about a one-way communication of saying, well, if I could just explain it to everybody, they get it, right? That's not the case, right? It's up to you to learn how to explain it better. And to your point, I know lots of kind of serial entrepreneur types that most of the businesses that they start are just, they do a series of landing pages. And to your point, they do, they're like, hey, if here's the product here. There's no product, that it doesn't exist, but here's the product, here's the idea, here's the promise, here's the problem it solves. And if you have interest, enter your email address here. And then they run ads on Facebook or LinkedIn or different things to see what sort of gauge of interest they get there. And I've seen lots of people start businesses that way. But to your point, a lot of people think, well, I got to go out and I got to build a box, and I got to find a manufacturer. I got to go to China, or I got to find an engineer. Or I got to find, they jump like 16 steps too far, and then they wonder why they get burnt out so quickly.
Yeah. Well, we're all human. And what does that mean? Is people like solving their own problems. People like talking about themselves, and people will pick comfort versus discomfort. And so if you can go to somebody and say, hey, I'm not trying to sell you anything today. I'm trying to learn about your market, or I want to show you a product idea I have, or I have this MVP. Would you be willing to try it and give me your feedback? I mean, if you go in not trying to sell something, and you go in trying to solve their problem, and you're thinking about them, and you put yourself in their shoes, and you create an empathetic relationship for where they're at and how you can make their life better, that is going to help somebody with an idea and push them a long way down the road, which also, oh, by the way, means they don't need as much money, which, oh, by the way, means they don't have to try to go raise money from investors who are already skittish because the economy is soft.
Right. Well, let's talk about that, because that's obviously one of the first questions that I usually get. I'm sure it's one of the first questions you get is, how do I find money? How do I get money? And so I know people that are like, I went to a bank and they wouldn't give me any money to start a business. And I'm like, well, do you have collateral? I mean, that's something they care about, right? I myself just purchased some land, and I couldn't take out a mortgage because there's no property to have as collateral on it. It's just the land. And so I had to take out a personal loan to purchase the land. So talk to me a little bit, Rick, about how do you first when you're educating somebody on how to raise money, where to start from? Let's say this person does have an idea, and they've proven it at least a little bit, and they're ready to go out and try to move it to the next level. Where do you start, Rick? Where do you suggest people look?
Sure. So this itself could be its own conversation, and maybe if I do a good job, you'll have me back a second time and we can dive into it more. However, if we're doing just a kind of a quick flyby, there's just a few key things to think about. Number one, let's say you have a conversation with somebody. The first thing they're going to say is, show me something. So you have to have the right tools. What are the right tools? Could be a one-page executive summary. It could be a PowerPoint presentation. It could be a mock-up of your product. But whatever an investor is going to ask you for, you want to have that so they don't go cold. All right? You bring this idea up. They're going to say, hey, show me something. You have to show them something. Okay, so that's number one. On the tools to do any of that, the best thing that I can do for you or our listening audience, viewing audience, is, hey, Guy Kawasaki has written a book a long time ago called Art of the Start. He had a format 10, 20, 30. 10 slides, 20 minutes, 30 font. Just look it up. You don't have to buy the book. Lots of YouTube videos. Guy Kawasaki, 10, 20, 30. That's a wonderful format to put ideas down on paper. It's also very easy to iterate. So you can go through, put 2 or 3 bullet points, go through very fast and get your ideas on paper, and then go back and just refine each of the slides. Anyway, again, Guy Kawasaki, 10, 20, 30. Second thing you can do is there's a group that works to improve PowerPoint presentations called Slide Bean, B-E-A-N, Slide Bean. I'm not suggesting that anybody pay them necessarily. They can if they want, but out on the internet, you can find Slide Bean's example of how they spruced up the original Airbnb PowerPoint deck. And that shows you some visuals for making the content better. So if you take Guy Kawasaki's 10-20-30, you take Slide Bean's review of the original Airbnb deck, mash those two things together, and you're going to end up with a very good deck. I mean, a really good deck that will get you attention from anybody who is interested in what you're doing. Okay, so number one, prep, have your materials. Number two, I just said it right there. Who would be interested? If you have a medical product idea, you don't want to go to an IT person. If you have an e-commerce or SaaS idea, you don't go to a medical investor, number one. Number two, so they have to be interested in the category. Number two, they have to be interested in the stage. Somebody who's going to give you seed money may be different than somebody who would write a check for $50 million. So are they interested in the category? Are they interested in the stage? And number three, you don't want to come in and say, hey, I'm trying to make payroll next week. Do you want to write a check? Try to foster a relationship with, call them a prospect, with this prospect. So in other words, go out to find this audience and maybe start to foster that relationship before you need their money. Like maybe you comment on some of the posts they're doing. Maybe you share with them some information that would be valuable. If they like SaaS products in a certain category and you go to a trade show covering that category, you might send them an email saying, hey, here's some stuff I learned at this trade show, thought you might find it valuable. So try to develop a relationship so you're not going in cold, and you don't want to try to get money for a month from now because it's not going to happen. You're in for the marathon, not the sprint. So if your materials are good and you approach the right person, and hopefully you're not coming in all the way cold, those things will help you raise money. Tying this in now, say, to the banks and maybe the angels, because that's where we start. Angel investor, you have to feed them a little bit more. An institutional venture investor is going to, they're doing this for a living, so they don't maybe need as much hand-holding to get to the finish line. So for an angel investor, you're going to want to try to give them a little bit more. And then ultimately, all of this, I think, depends on, I used the word empathy before. Put yourself in their shoes. Yes, you might have an idea for the best mousetrap ever, but that's only one part of the story. You have to look at the world from their perspective. And ultimately, those people need to earn a return on their money. And so if you have priced your deal so high that they can't make a return over time, then it's not going to work for them. So you're not being empathetic. You're not putting yourself in their shoes if you don't look long and hard at the valuation. And I would say I started with materials, and the two things that knock people out of the box right away, term I would use, your DOA, you're already dead before you even open your mouth, is the materials are not very good and the valuation is out of whack. And so they know as soon as they see this, oh, crappy materials, not going to do it. Or, gee, cool materials, like what they're doing, but the valuation paints me into a corner and eliminates the opportunity to really, truly make a reasonable return. And so you're committing an unforced error by going in with bad materials that's priced inappropriately relative to the risks they're taking and the returns they need to make, because all they're doing is taking other people's money and trying to make a return. So you need to understand clearly how they're going to make money.
Yeah, it makes sense. Okay, so one other question around this before I move on is something I hear from a lot of entrepreneurs is they've got an idea, they're all looking for money, and somebody shows up and they're like, great, I will give you some money for a piece of the company. And they might not even have made anything yet or have anything yet. What's your advice to those people when somebody shows up and says, all right, I'll give you $50,000 to get you off the ground, but I want 10% of the company or something like that?
Well, that goes to what I just said about the valuation, and that's a little bit more art than science. However, for somebody trying to raise money, they might talk to some other entrepreneurs, then maybe they know somebody who's invested before, so they have some feedback. They might get some help from their lawyer or their accountant. But let's just use that number, the $50,000 for 10% of the company. What that implies is what's called a post-money valuation of $500,000. So $50,000 is 10% of $500,000. So somebody writes a check for $50,000. The company's now worth $500,000. Their 50 buys them 10%. And so the post-money value is $500,000. So you the week earlier, the month earlier, the year earlier, you had something that either didn't exist or wasn't worth anything. You now have something that's worth $500,000 and you own 90% of it. Okay, sounds like a good deal so far. Secondly, people that don't think there's going to be dilution. I mean, sometimes, like if you have a consulting business, you can take the profits from the consulting business and productize what you're doing and develop the product on the backs of the consulting business. Or they frankly get some help, Kurt, from you at Foundry to develop the product. And so they're not doing it themselves, but they're taking that consulting revenue and paying you and Foundry to develop the product for them. And so sometimes that happens, but not all that much. Most of the time, people do have to get somewhere along the line investment dollars, and dilution is going to happen. And it's kind of the old saying of, do you want a big piece of a small pie, or do you want a little smaller piece of a bigger pie? And, that saying, shit happens. Well, dilution happens. And I myself would like a little smaller piece of a bigger pie and try to grow the pie, as opposed to hold it all to myself and have the thing really not get off the ground. And so I think people need to just let it go. There's been studies over the years that suggest that when companies get public, and granted, by the time they get public, there's been a lot of financing, generally speaking, but the studies have shown that the founder has in their neighborhood of, let's just say, 5 to 10% of the company.
Okay,
but
makes sense.
If the company's worth hundreds of millions or billions of dollars, and somebody has 5 to 10%, if the company has success, dilution is not going to matter. There's going to be enough zeros behind, what the founder's shares are worth. And so better question is, how can I grow this? How big can it be? How fast can I do it? And how does this money help me achieve those goals? And the reality is that money probably is necessary to take that leap to the next level or really accomplish what you're trying to do.
Yeah, makes sense. So do you, if I'm an entrepreneur and I maybe I do have a little bit of imposter syndrome when it comes to being an entrepreneur, maybe I should go, maybe I'm thinking to myself, like, I should get an MBA, or what kind of education resources, Rick, are the best, in your opinion, that you've seen successful people come out of? Is it intensives like Clubby? Is it, where do you get, we talked a lot about my mindset. Where do I start building those skill sets in a way where I feel comfortable?
Right. I would rather have somebody that has the growth mindset, the lifelong learning mindset, that's gritty, that is willing to roll up their sleeves and get their fingernails dirty and, get down into it and fight the fight and not sweat about what diploma or whatever's hanging on the wall. I would rather all day long have a gritty street fighter that has gone through the school of hard knocks versus the person that has advanced degrees from the most recognized learning institutions in the country. I myself do have a master's degree, but I also did that while I was working in venture capital and private equity. So I did it at nights, on weekends, pre-kids. And I found that it would be valuable for me, but I didn't let it stop me. And then I would also say that some of the people that have had the biggest successes that I know have either A, not even graduated from high school, or B, either didn't go to college or didn't graduate from college. So I don't think there's a big correlation necessarily between having success and what the degree on the wall says. And again, all day long, I'll take the street fighter who went through the school of hard knocks and is going to go shoulder to shoulder with me as we go, slay dragons. So don't let any of that hinder you. Now, with that said, those are tools that can be valuable. So it depends on the person, what they want, what they enjoy. Some people aren't made to go to the classroom. Some people aren't made to try to learn out of a book. And I would say people should do what feels best for them, what feels right for them, and don't sweat it because it's nobody else's journey. They do what's right for them. They follow their passion. They use the skills that God gave them. They hone them. They, again, grind it out, saying from the T. LaSalle basketball program that won 6 straight titles in a row. And my number 2 played on a couple of those teams was #grinders win. Grinders win, and I'll take the grinder every single day, regardless of whether they have an advanced degree or didn't even finish high school.
Yeah, it makes sense. I love these sports analogies because I think one of the best entrepreneur books I read was Phil Knight's Shoe Dog. I love that book because of how he built Nike and how he never lost sight of his vision for what it wasn't even like the shoe he wanted to make. It was a dent in the universe that he wanted to make. And I think that's when we talk about mindset, Rick, that's what I think about is that I don't want to just make the internet bigger or put something else on a Walmart shelf. Like I want to make a dent in the universe.
Yeah. And you think of the slogan, just do it. And getting behind fabulous athletes like Michael Jordan. And you think about, what does Nike sell? Do they sell a shoe? Or do they sell an internal feeling that somebody has for themselves when they go out to try to tackle an accomplishment, or as I said earlier, slay a dragon? They're calling in us that inner drive that's in all of our DNAs to go out and compete, to go out and slay dragons, or to go out and accomplish very difficult things. So they tapped into that emotion. And that's great that you brought that up, Kurt, because of an example of a business. They weren't selling shoes. Prior to Nike, that's what people sold, was shoes. Nike sold a feeling, an emotion, and really tapped into kind of the inner workings of us humans.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's something that all entrepreneurs can learn is that, especially when an idea is new, I mean, that's what they're buying is an idea more so than just I have this problem and I need to have it solved. I want to solve this problem, but I want it to be something that a person like me attaches themselves to. So it's why you see, the iPhones and the Androids out there and the whole difference it is. Because to your point, Apple is a luxury brand now. They used to be a hardware manufacturer and software maker, but they're more akin to a Gucci or a Rolex or things these days, because it's not to say that there isn't a lot of care and craft that goes into the machinery, but that's not what they're selling as much. It's this lifestyle, this idea. And I saw a recent study where they were polling, kids that, people younger than 18. And I think 87% of them, if they had a phone, had an iPhone. And that was, and they asked them why. And they were like, well, because it's an iPhone. Like it wasn't because it has a better camera or something. They don't care, So to your point, one last question I have for you, Rick, as I'm growing as an entrepreneur, I mean, being an entrepreneur, to your point, is always being a student, right? You're a lifelong learner, right? And as I'm doing that, where have you found the best resources for entrepreneurs to, because you can get blinders on, right? You can get on a box and you're just heads down working on your product all day. Where can I go and find other entrepreneurs to learn from, and where are good resources out there that you found that you would send people to?
Good question. Of course, I'd send them to Club E. But other than that, and if you did want to learn about E, and E stands for entrepreneur, actually a 30-second digression from the conversation, I actually got sued by Entrepreneur Magazine because they didn't want me to call my lunch group Club Entrepreneur.
Really?
So, yeah. So that's why
Entrepreneur Magazine.
Club E was a nickname. Instead of people saying Club Entrepreneur, people just started coming and calling it Club E. The website, clube.com, just allowed me to tap into that nickname. However, I was calling it Club Entrepreneur until I got sued. Anyway, so evidently they don't have the full spirit of trying to, lift the whole universe.
Well, I was going to say, it's a magazine. They're probably the only way they make money these days is by suing people.
Probably
is my assumption. Anyway, so let's not use Entrepreneur Magazine as a resource.
There's about 400 videos. If you go to my last name, Brimacomb.com, you can access it there. Also on YouTube, the channel is @Brimacomb, my last name. And anyway, so you can get all that stuff there. Okay, put that aside. I think that people are going to learn the most and the best when they're pursuing things that are interesting to them.
Let's go to me. Let's see here. Come on back, Rick. Love learning about entrepreneurship because I think the biggest thing is mindset. I think that's the biggest challenge people have when it comes to entrepreneurship. I think skill set wise, like Rick was saying, doesn't matter if you have an MBA or if you have some crazy degrees or whatever. I think it really comes down to grit, mindset, having a curious mind. You really want to learn. You see a problem that you don't think other people are solving. And then you got to go out and find out what those things are. There's a great book by Clayton Christensen called Jobs to Be Done. I would definitely check out. And the reason why I like it, the whole idea of jobs to be done is that whatever problem you're thinking about solving for people probably have already tried to solve it in some way. So what else have they hired in that place to do that? There he is. He's back. Nope. Says you're still in the green room. Hang on. Let me bring you in to guest one. Let's see. I haven't done this before. This is new. Hang on, Rick. Hang on. Okay. I'm going to assign you to guest 1. Okay.
Well, I hope that didn't F up too much. Oh, now I can't hear you. And I don't have my microphone in. I heard you a moment ago.
There we are.
There.
Okay. No, we didn't screw it up.
So that I can't remember the last time that happened, so I apologize to
It's all right.
being a bad guest.
No, we're fine. We're fine. Because that's the joy of recording, Rick. So I will just cue it up real again with the last question, which is sorry, I totally blanked right now.
The last question was
where do I go and get more education?
Resources.
Yeah. All right. So
I was just going to pivot from Clubby to other things.
Yes. Perfect. All right. So Clubby, what else would you suggest for people out there, Rick, to go and find more information on how to be a successful entrepreneur?
Sure. So Kurt, of course, other than Clubby, which again, you can find information at www.brimacomb, my last name.com. And you could also go to YouTube, and the YouTube channel is at Brimacomb, which is Brimacomb. Anyway, other than Club E, I would tell you to follow what's of interest to you. So I mentioned earlier Guy Kawasaki. Many, many YouTube videos out there that you could look at. Several books. All those would be valuable. I mentioned SlideBean and Airbnb. You could look at a lot of stuff that SlideBean has pushed out about how to make presentations better. So going down those kinds of rabbit holes or wormholes, whatever you want to call it, pursuing stuff that you think is interesting, I think will be valuable. And then the other thing that I would tell you to do is think outside the box. And just because it's a bestseller book doesn't mean it's the only place you might learn something. Go hear a speaker. Go to the bookstore and just thumb through a bunch of different things. I believe the best business people are fairly well-rounded, meaning they've learned things at different spots, and they're able to tie those seemingly disparate things together to say, oh, I learned something over here and I learned something over here. How do I put those things together? And perfect example is, say, that bleach pen thing. You took a pen and you put bleach in it. Actually know the guy who came up with that idea, a friend of mine. And so 2 different things put together created a great product idea. So I would tell you it's not so much what you learn, is how much you learn and how open-minded you are. So you could really do anything if you're consuming something that has some merit, even something about people that go on an expedition and they face these challenges and just kind of learning about human nature. You're always going to learn something if you have your eyes and ears open. So I think it's more about volume than exactly what you try to learn. And if you're pursuing things that are of interest to you, you're going to retain it, you're going to incorporate it, and you're thinking like my world, for example, when I was a junior guy at what was then Norwest Venture Capital, they were doing both private equity and venture under the same roof. And so I learned how to do both private equity and venture, and they're different. And so if you're learning one language, Spanish, and then you learn another language, French, you're going to be able to tie things together. So I don't know that it really matters where you go, just as long as you're going somewhere and you're consistent and you have your eyes and ears open and you go in with a growth mindset and you're just always trying to learn.
I love it, Rick. I'm so appreciative of the work you do. You've been such a valuable resource for people out there over the years. And so I encourage everyone who's listening or watching to go into the description. You can check out all the links to Rick's info, and you can find out more about Club E and everything they're doing there. And Rick, thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy day. I appreciate you joining me.
Kurt, it was a pleasure, as it always is when we talk, and I look forward to talking to you again soon.
We appreciate you taking the time to listen to this episode of Schmidt List. The stories shared by our guests are genuinely inspiring and offer insightful knowledge. It's important to remember that success doesn't happen overnight and requires collaboration, learning, and perseverance. If you want to broaden your professional connections, check out Kurt's book, The Little Book of Networking: How to Build Your Career One Conversation at a Time, on Amazon. Please stay connected with all things Schmidt List on social media, leave a review for the podcast, and join our community of like-minded entrepreneurs. Thank you for being part of Schmidt List. Keep innovating, collaborating, and chasing your entrepreneurial dreams.